Okay, so good morning. We are on Chaf Beis Amud Beis 22b. We reached a Mishnah that is after the Gemara's analysis of the previous Mishnah. We now learn another Mishnah, and this becomes the last Mishnah of this chapter, which will be analyzed over the next few 2 pages or so in the Gemara, and then begins the following chapter. Now, this Mishnah could be divided into 3 sections. The first is related to the previous discussion. The second is related to the laws of the offering, the laws of a specific type of offering, which is offered along with the Sotah proceeding. And then number 3, the third section, the Mishnah discusses some distinctions between men and women in various different ritual proceedings surrounding the temple. So those are the 3 sections. Now, the truth is, I should have looked up the Mishnah in its original, because it would seem to me that section number 1, the first section of this Mishnah, really belongs before the previous analysis. Because we're going to see it, the Mishnah is going to be discussing the idea of merit and whether merit helps suspend the demise of the accused Sotah, which was really discussed in the previous few pages in the Gemara. In fact, this first section of the Mishnah was actually quoted by the Gemara some 10 pages ago and analyzed there. So it's curious to me that the format of the Gemara places this part of the Mishnah at the beginning of the next section, as opposed to the end of the previous section. But this is the way it is, so let's read it. Maybe there's a star here on the side that gives us some help. No, the star just tells us to look earlier where the Gemara analyzed it. Okay. So the Mishnah reads, Rabbi Shimon said, Ein schus toila b'mayim hamarim. In the previous Mishnah, the Gemara quoted the view that if a woman is accused of a Sotah, goes through the whole proceedings and drinks the water, it's quite possible that she's guilty, and nonetheless, she will not meet her demise, at least not immediately, because she has some merit, and we discussed at length the nature of that merit and how long the demise is suspended, for a few months, for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. Is the merit of mitzvah? Is it the merit of Torah? Which led us into a whole discussion about the respective virtues of Torah, mitzvahs, and so on. But Rabbi Shimon's of the view, right? And that led us to a discussion about whether one should even teach their daughters Torah. Should they know about such merit? Should they not? And so on and so forth. But Rabbi Shimon here is of the view that the notion of merit does not work at all. If the woman is guilty of this accused infidelity, and we don't know about that, and the Sotah waters that she drinks is supposed to determine that guilt, then no merit will help suspend whatever demise is coming to her. This is Rabbi Shimon's view. And his view is rather logical. He says like this, V'im ata oimer, and if you were to suggest that as schus toila b'mayim hama'arin, that merit will help to suspend the cursing of the water, the demise that the drinking of the water would bring along to a woman is guilty. Madhe ata, you're causing like a distrust or making a mockery, some form of translation somewhere there. Es hamayim, the water, b'fnei kol hanashim, hashoisos, for all the women who drink it. You're making a mockery of the water because, the drinking of the water and the whole Sotah proceeding, at least in its most basic form, is meant to be a deterrent. A woman misbehaves behind closed doors, and she thinks no one's going to find out. But if she drinks the Sotah water, God knows, and her demise will be met. So this is a deterrent that A, she shouldn't misbehave, and more importantly, she shouldn't want to drink the water. She should be compelled to confess to her guilt. Because as we're going to learn soon, if she confesses to her guilt, then she doesn't drink the water. And if she doesn't drink the water, so because she's confesses to her guilt, therefore she goes through a divorce, she loses the right to the ketubah, but at least she stays living and healthy. Right? Now, if the Sotah waters don't work, then the woman will reason to herself, look, I don't mind drinking the Sotah water, no big deal. I got merit and I'm going to be fine. So the whole deterrent of the water falls away if merit suspends it. It becomes almost like meaningless. So the Rishon says you can't do that. You can't just say that the water that a merit supersedes the effect of the water. Then no one's going to take the whole thing seriously, and the woman won't be deterred from drinking it. Now, the reason why we want to deter women from drinking it, first of all, we don't want women to meet their demise, even if they are guilty. So we'd rather them confess rather than drinking and finding their demise. But also, we don't want to unnecessarily erase the name of God. Right? The water she drinks has the name of God written on a parchment, the whole section of the Torah, which we discussed earlier, and gets erased into the water. We don't want to erase God's name in vain. And if she's going to take the whole thing lightly and she'll just say, well, in her own mind, she'll reason to herself, look, I'm guilty, I know, but I don't care. I'll drink the water anyway because I have a merit. And then we're going to end up erasing God's name much more than necessary. People won't take it seriously and so on. So Rabbi Shimon therefore says, no such thing as merit. If she's guilty, it's effective. She's not guilty, it's not effective. That's it. It's black and white. It's binary. Furthermore, says Rabbi Shimon, Umoitzi ata shemra alataris sheshasu. If you are of the view that merit suspends the demise, even for a woman who's guilty, then this inevitably will cause a bad reputation for women who are not guilty and drank the water. How's that? Because sha'omrim, others might say, Timei they were actually guilty, but they had merit. So in addition to the fact that if you say there's merit, then the woman who was going through the process is not going to take it very seriously, because she'll say, whatever, I don't care drinking the water, I've got merit, I'm fine. Besides for that, there are other women who in reality are innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. Or maybe they did something wrong by secluding themselves with this man, but they were not unfaithful. Nothing happened behind those doors. So they drink the water and nothing happens to them because they're innocent. But everybody else is going to say, well, really, she's guilty. But we know she's got lots of merit, and that's why she's not dying as a result of this water. So not only do you make the women who are going through the process not take it seriously, but there's going to be plenty of women who will remain under suspicion even after drinking the water because they're going to say, oh, there's merit that's protecting her. And the whole point of the water, the drinking of the water is, number one, the deterrent for the woman who's going through this process. She shouldn't want to drink it, which that falls away if there's an issue of merit. And number two is to bring clarity. Is the woman guilty or not guilty? So when she drinks the water, if she survives, good, we know she's not guilty. If she dies, then we know she is guilty. But now that you're saying there's an issue of merit, then we have no idea of knowing if she was guilty or innocent by drinking the water, because maybe she's guilty and she has a merit. And therefore, all the women who drank the water and are truly innocent and therefore survived, they're going to still be suspected by other people for being unfaithful, but they had a merit and therefore they survived. And for these two reasons, Rabbi Shimon argues there's no such thing as merit overriding the effect of the Sotah water. And as I said, it would seem to me that this is rather logical, but I don't believe this is the halacha. To the best of my knowledge, merit does work. Okay. So this is view number two. View number one, which we learned about in the preceding Mishnah, was that merit works up to a year. And then the Gemara introduced other opinions, whether it works up to 9 months, a year, 2 years, or 3 years. That was opinion number one, that it works that merit suspends the demise for a couple of years, for a certain amount of time, varying opinions about how long that is. Opinion number two is Rabbi Shimon, which says merit never works. The water is 100% effective and it's completely binary. Guilty, demise, innocent, no demise. Now the Gemara has a third view, which is Rabbi. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, Rabbi is Rabbi Yehuda, Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, author of or compiler of the Mishnah, he said, Haschus toila b'mayim hamarim, merit will suspend the effect of the water, of the drinking of the water. Now, the first thing is, even though it suspends the effect of the water, it doesn't bring her blessing. And therefore, she won't have children afterwards. And she doesn't get necessarily better. Right? If a person is innocent, if a woman is innocent, then the water that she drinks actually has a positive effect on her. And if she had a hard time conceiving before, she'll have children. If she had a hard time with labor, she'll be blessed with easier labor. Now, that doesn't happen to her because it so happens she's guilty. She just happens to have a merit. Okay, so she's guilty, but merit. So because of her guilt, she's not going to get any of the blessings that come along with someone who's innocent that drinks this water. But she won't have the immediate demise either because she has a merit. So how long does this effect last? So says the Gemara, says Rabbi's view. So the previous view in the Mishnah was, from last Mishnah, was it suspends for a certain amount of time, either a year, 2 years, 9 months, or whatnot. Rabbi's view is that it suspends, the demise is suspended, the effect of the drinking of the water is suspended. But what happens is, she slowly starts to deteriorate. And at the end, she dies of the same death. Meaning as follows. It would seem to me that this is what the Rabbi means. In a situation where the woman is guilty and she has no merit, then we learned before in the previous Mishnah that the negative effect of the Sotah water, she starts to get bloated and her stomach collapses and so on. That happens right away. And we learned earlier that this happens so immediately that those present would actually say, take her out, so that there's no impurity in the temple. We discussed what that impurity is. Right? But the point is, it happens right away. Or if she's guilty with no merit. Rebbe's view is, it would seem to me, that this woman who has a merit might die at the ripe old age she would have died had she not been guilty. But because she's guilty and she drank that water, then the manner in which she dies later, whenever that time is, will be the same manner that she died had she died right away. Meaning she won't die of other sicknesses or car accident or anything else that people die of, but she'll die specifically in this manner in which her stomach bloats and her stomach gives out and so on. So this is Rabbi's view, that the suspension works for her entire life, but the manner of death still remains. So Rabbi is a kind of hybrid in that it's true that at least right after she drinks the water, people will still be suspicious of her. Maybe she's guilty, and that's why she's not dying. But eventually, when she dies, it will be known, oh, she was guilty because of the manner in which she died. So this seems to be a kind of middle ground between Rabbi Shimon, which said merit doesn't work at all, and the previous opinions, which said merit only suspends for 2 years or whatnot. And given this little note right here that I'm highlighting, this little base, it would indicate that this is the actual law. Okay, so this ends section 1 of the Mishnah, which, as I mentioned, has really been analyzed in the previous texts. And it's funny to me that it's being positioned here in the Mishnah as opposed to at the end of the previous Mishnah. So it would be interesting, I'll do this after, I'll look up the original Mishnayos, meaning not the Mishnah as it's presented in the Gemara, but rather the Mishnah in and itself, and see how it's broken up. Maybe the Mishnah is broken up differently. Okay, so that was part 1 of the Mishnah. Continuing the discussion about the effect of merit. And essentially with 3 opinions. Opinion number 1 is the previous Mishnah, which is that the merit suspends for a certain amount of time, varying degrees of how long that lasts, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Opinion number 2 is Rabbi Shimon, which he has a very strong argument, which is merit never works, and that way you retain the integrity of the water, because it's binary, either guilty and it's effective, innocent and it brings the blessing. Nowhere in the middle, and everybody knows who's guilty and who's innocent, and anyone who's knows they're guilty is scared of drinking the water because they know the effects are immediate. This is Rabbi Shimon's view. Rabbi's view is merit can suspend the effect, but it only delays it to a later time. But eventually the effect will be the same. Okay, section 2 of the Mishnah. And here the Mishnah gets to laws relating to the offering. So to properly understand this, just a quick introduction to the laws of offering in general. One way to imagine the laws of Karbonos, they're very detailed, very complex, and I'm not going to profess to remember all the details. It's way too much to, at least for my mind. But you can think of the principles in like an axis, right? So you have one axis, which is what type of offering is it? Is it a sin offering? Is it a guilt offering? Is it a burnt offering? Is it a peace offering? That's one axis. And the other axis is going to be, what are you offering? Are you offering a cow, a sheep? Is it a goat? Is it a bird? Is it male? Is it female? Is it a meal offering, meaning like flour? Is it wine? Is it oil? So those are the two axes. What type of offering is it? Sin, guilt, burnt, peace. And the other side is what, I don't want to say material, but what's the substance of that offering? What type of animal is it, right? And then depending on where you are on the axis, that will tell you what to do with the animal. There are certain exceptions with the substance, with the offering. There are certain exceptions to each of these rules, but this is generally the way the laws of Karbonos are structured. In fact, this is the way it's introduced in the Torah. When the Torah begins by Yikra, first it starts off with, okay, there are different types of animals you might bring, and here's what would happen to all these animals. And then it tells you there are different types of offering, guilt, sin, this, that, and this is how the proceedings go. And then only later it tells you, well, for this case, you bring that kind of offering. For this case, you bring that kind of offering, and so on and so forth. But you have to keep on referencing back to that axis to know what you do in each scenario. That's how one can structure a frame. This is very, very, very broad strokes, but this is kind of what it is. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because the Sotah brings a meal offering. That is, it's made up of flour. Now, ordinarily, a flour offering has a certain proceeding, which is, let's see the details that are relevant for now. Okay, so number one is the meal offering is brought. The flour is brought by the person who's offering. Number two is it's placed into a vessel that belongs to the temple. And in that moment, when it's placed into the vessel that belongs to the temple, this flour, this meal offering becomes now consecrated. It becomes consecrated as holy. We'll explain what that is in a moment. The next step is, at least relevant for our discussion here, is there's a fistful taken from this flour and placed on the altar. Depending on what kind of meal offering, there's other things mixed in it. That's the offering part, that fistful that gets offered on the altar. And then the rest of the meal offering, at least in most cases, at least in the case of the Sotah, is eaten by the kohen or the owners, depending on the situation. So this is the proceeding as relevant for our discussion, and we're going to
eaten raw, Reb Levi. It's eaten raw.
No, it's baked.
Oh, okay.
Baked is also depending on the scenario, but it's mixed and baked. And then different types of offerings, you can either spice them up or not spice them up. You can salt them, not salt them. You can mix with what type of materials you can use. There are all kinds of variables, again, depending on where on the axis you put this offering. But these are the general outline relevant for our discussion. So the Gemara is going to tell us some of the laws related to these steps and some exceptions to the rule. And some of the exceptions are not going to be specific to the Sotah. In fact, probably most of the laws that we're going to learn now are not specific to the Sotah. It's true of any meal offering that finds itself on this axis. And that is as follows. Nitmeis minchasa. If the meal offering, the flour, became impure, contact to ritual impurity, and now cannot be offered. Now, at which point did it become impure? So, if it became impure before the moment of its consecration, when it enters into that vessel that belongs to the temple, so harehi kol hamanachos, then this gets the law of every other kind of meal offering, v'tifte, and it could be redeemed. I'm just translating literally, and I'll explain the background in a moment. But once the meal offering, the flour, enters this consecrated vessel that belongs to the temple, and thus the flowers become consecrated, it then gets the same law as all other meal offerings, the tisarif, and gets burned. So what happened there? What's changed from the moment before the flour was put into the consecrated vessel to after? So Rashi explains for us like this. There's something called Kedushas Damim or Kedushas Haguf. Kedushas Damim means the value is holy. Kedushas Haguf means the actual substance is holy. The body is holy, literally the body, the substance. Which means like this: what belongs to the temple when I decide that I'm going to bring a meal offering? So I am now obligated to bring that meal offering. So what holiness or what hold does the temple have on that meal offering? So at this point, because it's only my word, I've obligated myself to bring a meal offering. It hasn't yet entered the temple property. So the only thing the temple owns, so to speak, is the value of that offering. And therefore, if the offering here has become ritually impure, so all I have to do is get the value of it and then bring a different meal offering. Sell it, redeem it, in the language of the Mishnah, redeem it. In other words, sell it to someone else who can eat impure food, because why not? I'll take the cash, the value, and buy a new meal offering and then bring that. Because the only holiness here is on the value, not on the actual substance. There are times, depending on how a person words his obligation to bring an offering, where right from the start, the actual substance is consecrated and belongs to the temple, but not in the case of the Sotah and not in the case of most meal offerings, in which the person says, I'm obligated, or I'm obligating myself, or the circumstances say here, the Sotah obligate me in bringing a meal offering. So even if I designate this bag of flour to be used for the offering, the consecration is not on the actual substance of the flour, but only on the value of the flour. And therefore, if the flour is rendered invalid because it's impure, I can just exchange it, change it for, sell it, get cash, the value which belongs to the temple, and then buy some other meal offering. But now, once it enters into the vessel that belongs to the temple, and now the actual substance has been consecrated, not just the value, but the substance itself has been consecrated. So now I can't just substitute, and now it becomes invalid, it becomes impure. So I can't just take it out of the vessel, sell it, and put another one in there. That would be like stealing from the temple, because the actual substance belongs to the temple, not just the values. I can't just take it and sell it. So what do? I can't offer it in the temple because it's impure. I can't sell it because the actual substance belongs to the temple. Kedushas haguf, the actual substance is holy. And this is when the Mishnah here says, tisarif, if it gets burned. There's a special area in the temple in which they would burn invalidated offerings. And that's where they would burn or dispose of this meal offering that became impure after it entered the vessel, thus making the actual substance holy, and thus cannot be sold. And now it comes out of my pocket where I got to buy a new one. Right? So in the first case, where it became impure before it went into the consecrated vessel, and therefore only the value belonged to the temple, it's not going to cost me any extra money. It's just a little effort. I got to sell this and buy new flour. But in the case where it became impure after the flowers entered the consecrated vessel, and thus the actual substance itself now belongs to the temple, it's going to cost me a little bit more, because I can't just sell it and buy a new one. That stuff is burnt, and now I got to take it out of my own pocket and buy a new one. So this is the law by the Sotah, and as the Mishnah tells us, that the same thing is true of all offerings on the same axis. Any other meal offering, the same is true. If a person, even someone who just, not because they are obligated to bring a meal offering, but because they pledge to bring a meal offering, because they want to give a thanksgiving to God, right? Let's say, and they want to use the meal offering. So they pledge to do so. So again, if it becomes impure before they put it into the consecrated vessel, they can sell it and use that cash value to buy another one. If it became impure after it's entered the consecrated vessel, now the actual substance itself belongs to the temple. It cannot be sold. That's got to be burnt. And then the person has to buy a new one. Okay, I'm going to stop over here because the Gemara is now going to go into a number of details of scenarios in which laws that are unique to the Sotah, which is after the flour has been consecrated, it's been put into the consecrated vessel and thus belongs to the temple. The substance itself is holy and cannot be sold and use the cash for another one. The flour's got to be burnt. But after that happened, there were other scenarios, other things that caused the offering to be invalid and therefore cannot be used. In the first case we just used, it became invalid by becoming in contact with impurity. Tomorrow we're going to learn other cases in which the flour becomes invalid and thus cannot be used for the Sotah offering and must be burnt. So a number of cases like that coming tomorrow. I'm going to stop here because some of those details are elaborate and I want to expand on them so we understand them more deeply.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good day.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day. Thank you.